The clean energy industry has a messaging problem. Projects are getting built, the costs are coming down, the jobs are real. Somewhere between what's happening on the ground and what's reaching the public, the signal is getting lost. Welcome to Project Vanguard podcast, home of the community of veterans in energy, where we explore the journeys of veterans, and today one military supporter, leading in energy. We're building American energy dominance through an all-the-above approach, where energy security is national security. And our mission is to double the number of veterans working in the energy industry. I'm your host, Kevin Doffing. Today's guest is Frank Macchiarola. Frank leads policy and advocacy at American Clean Power, the trade association representing utility-scale power generation of the energy sector. He spent 20 years working in energy policy across both the oil and gas industry and renewable energy industry, including time on Capitol Hill and with the American Petroleum Institute. We talk about why energy has become a political football, who the real messengers are, and why frontline workers, veterans, and local constituents can move policymakers in ways that lobbyists can't and probably shouldn't. We also get into what the external affairs career pathway looks like and whether more veterans should consider it. Let's get into it. Frank, thanks for making time to be here today. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Kevin. It's good to be with you.
Absolutely. So, Frank, what would you say you do these days in your role at ACP, at American Clean Power?
I lead the advocacy on behalf of the industry at the federal and state levels. And that's really the government relations on behalf of the issues that are important for the clean power sector. So we represent wind, solar, battery storage, really the full spectrum of the clean energy space. Companies from developers and utilities and financial service companies and pure play battery storage companies. It's a broad spectrum of folks that are delivering the energy that's necessary to power our everyday lives. It's an exciting time for the industry. And being on the advocacy side, that means working with policymakers at the federal, state, and local level to implement policies that benefit our industry and ultimately benefit the American consumer.
Yeah, and I think that, at least from my vantage point, which is pretty low, it seems like that's the tip of the spear right now. We know how to develop projects, we know how to finance projects, build projects, operate projects. The policy thing seems to be where the bottleneck is in the industry. I don't know if you'd agree with that or not.
Yeah, and it is an industry that's regulated. And so, whether it's issues around siting and permitting of projects or around tax treatment or trade policies, there's a whole host of issues that we work with the government on and that are really important how those issues shake out in terms of being able to get that energy deployed.
Why do you think that policy has become kind of this crutch point? Operationally, everything you just said makes sense, but it's become a little bit of a political football or a wedge issue. That's one of our big issues or, messages with Project Vanguard is we just want it all the above, secure energy, and it employs a lot of vets. That's it. And it's a message I find resonating, but I also find a lot of people come in with preconceived notions that the industry is woke or bad or whatever. Where do you think that came from?
It's a great question. I've worked on energy policy now for over 20 years.
Yeah, you were with American Petroleum Institute before, right?
I was with the American Petroleum Institute representing the oil and gas industry. I led the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee staff as the staff director there. So I've been involved in both the private sector and public sector on energy issues. And when I started, energy was really, the divisions broke down along geographical lines, right? If I was located in an energy producing area for oil and gas, I'd have a different point of view than a member of Congress or policymaker who was representing a state or district that had hydropower. So it really broke down not in terms of party lines or in ideological lines, but in geography. And that shift has occurred over time. And now what we try to tell folks is that there are no party lines when it comes to electrons and molecules. We all need energy. We need energy to power our lives. At the API where I worked, we used to say that oil and gas was 6% of the GDP, but it was the first six, right? Like you need that energy.
Is that where that quote comes from?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay.
And it makes a lot of sense, right? Because whether it's renewables or traditional forms of energy, that really is the building block and foundation upon which all the rest of the economy flows, whether it's schools or hospitals or the tech sector. They all need energy to be able to do what they do to drive economic growth, to produce their products, to raise standards of living, and it all comes from energy. Now, in the clean energy space, it's a bit of a complex scenario right now. You have a situation where the vast majority of our capital investments and employment and the projects that we're developing are actually occurring in red states and red districts. So we may have stronger support in areas on the coast or in Democratic strongholds, but our capital is being deployed in Republican areas. And what we argue is, again, the power is not political. The power is necessary for all of us. And our goal is affordable, reliable, cleaner energy. And we feel like the technologies that we represent, the companies that we work for, are at the forefront of those attributes for energy. And so it's challenging to make energy less partisan, but it's absolutely essential.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're always trying to talk about the security aspect of the industry because I feel like that's a benefit of the industry that's always been there, but not really well received or communicated. Because, I mean, we're seeing it with, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Energy independence isn't just a feel-good 4th of July, wave your flag, and you put independence behind energy. It's really getting behind the opportunity to secure your supply chains and secure your national prosperity. Because if you don't have energy, to your point, everything else stops. I mean, I saw that when I was in Iraq where, you'd have people fighting and gas lines. And we're now seeing that globally where some of the more constrained markets for fuel are in these massive lines. And I've even seen it in Houston after hurricanes where, the saying's 3 meals from barbarism in any society. Well, try to not be able to get your car filled when you need to get about and get groceries and do the things that you just need to do for your life. And tensions get high fast.
Yeah, Kevin, you know this, and the people you work with know this better than anyone. Energy security is national security. We see it in the conflict right now in Iran. We saw it a couple of years ago and still see it in the conflict in Russia. The vast majority of natural gas feeding into Europe comes from Russia. Mm-hmm. That became a real problem for other European countries, our allies, and our ability to get LNG to those countries during that period of time was really important. We've seen it in past conflicts around the world, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. Energy is absolutely essential to our livelihood. And the fact that, on the transportation fuel side, it's a global commodity that's traded on global markets makes it all the more complex. Now, we don't have those complexities in the renewable space on the power side. Our fuels for powering not just renewables, but traditional forms of energy are domestic. But what's so important about renewables is the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't shine all the time, but they are renewable fuels. They have zero cost, and the ability to store power now with battery storage has really changed the game for us. So we think when it comes to the question of national security, renewables can also play a key role in strengthening our energy security.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've never made the net zero argument. I'm in Houston. So, I mean, that was not going to be a winning argument for most of my friends. I owned an oil and gas company for a decade and have no qualms about that.
Wow.
But a zero marginal fuel cost that's not tied to a global commodity and doesn't have the same unscheduled maintenance issues that natural gas combined cycle plants will have. Because we'll have that in Texas where like it's April and you do rotations of scheduled maintenance, but then we have all this unscheduled maintenance that ends up happening at a lot of these plants. And, you just suddenly drop 5 megawatts, 50 megawatts, 150 megawatts that just come off and you got to like supplement it. And the batteries have been filling in that gap a lot. So we haven't had the issues that we have in prior years here in Texas. And I think this is the decade of storage personally.
Yeah, I agree. It's the fastest growing segment of our sector. It's interesting, thinking back, you talk about oil and gas and being in Houston. I think a lot of folks just sort of reflexively view renewables and oil and gas as in conflict or competitors. And if you think about what makes two industries or two segments of an industry in conflict, I think one is policy differences and the other is market competition. They actually don't overlap very much if you think about it from a policy standpoint.
Yeah.
The oil and gas transportation fuels, we don't work on those policy issues because there's no real market competition with wind and solar. And then on the electricity side, sure, natural gas, 43% of our electricity, renewables, 25% and growing. But there is no market competition right now. And the reason there isn't is because we need everything.
Yeah,
we have this incredible growth over the next 15 years that experts are estimating as a result of AI data centers, electrification, domestic manufacturing. Those confluence of events are really presenting a huge challenge for this country. And we cannot fight one resource against another resource. We need to figure out in this country, how do we maximize all of the resources that we have available to us? Again, from the renewable side of things, we are clean, we are affordable. Now, solar is the lowest cost form of electricity. They're also pretty fast to deploy, which is needed right now. So we feel like we're well positioned from a market position, also from a policy standpoint, but we don't feel this conventional wisdom of reflexively opposed to other forms of energy. I guess the last point is, it wouldn't surprise you, many of the companies that we represent at American Clean Power are diversified. They also have, in addition to renewable assets, they have fossil assets. Much like people's portfolios in their personal life, these companies are well positioned across the broad spectrum of the energy landscape. And we feel comfortable partnering with groups that represent the oil and gas industry. We've done it on permitting reform this year. We'll continue to do it on other issues going forward. Our view is we need an all of the above strategy in this country.
Yeah. I have friends that I've known in Houston for over a decade through different veteran employee resource group things that are ACP members at big pipeline companies because they're building so much solar that they have become a de facto solar developer segment inside their business, and they're ACP members. And they're like, yeah, I don't see what the big deal is. I'm like, okay, same. Because this is the thing I always see is that speed to market, cost of deployment, the zero marginal fuel cost, just the lower OpEx, right? It's just so much simpler. But then the messaging gets mired. What do you think's kind of driving that? Because I've even seen where, like Katie Miller, Stephen Miller's wife, who works with Elon Musk, has been really promoting a lot of solar stuff. But even as like someone across the aisle is promoting solar, my feed gets blown up with all these people who are like aghast that somebody from the other side would finally embrace solar. And it's like, do you want to win or do you want to like argue about being right? What are you doing here with getting upset that someone now agrees with you? What do you say to that kind of behavior, or how we need to get this more aligned with what's really happening in the field?
Yeah, I'd say that energy is not ideological. It's not politics. There's plenty of issues where folks can fight politically, but on energy, we need to bring everything we can to the challenge that we have. It's not that different, Kevin, than national security. Not to say we haven't had political debates about national security, but it seems to me that when we engage overseas, there used to be the expression that politics ended at the water's edge. I'm not so sure that that exists anymore, right? A war is a Republican war or a Democratic war, or you have to pick a side and oppose the other party in a conflict rather than recognizing that, first and foremost, we're all on the same team. Very important that this country gets this right. Yeah, I kind of feel like energy security is the same thing, right? If we can be less dependent on foreign sources of energy, if we can have a cleaner environment and lower cost fuels for people, and we can have reliable fuels and electricity, that is a huge win, not just for the consumer, not just for the entities that are engaged in producing and developing energy projects. It's a huge win for the country from our national security standpoint. And so I don't know why people react to somebody supporting their preferred fuel of choice. I would say, great, more people supporting it, the better. But I also don't even understand why we need political supporters for wind or for solar or for oil and gas. These things are the building blocks of our economy, the foundation of our productivity. Again, we should all be advocating for all of it. And we don't have that luxury either. We're going to see massive amounts of growth. We're going to be in an AI race with China.
Yep.
And the worst possible thing could be 10 years from now, realizing that we're behind in that race because we've decided to choose one fuel over another or one technology over another. We should embrace the technologies and resources that we have in this country. And I think the other thing is people just need to take the temperature down on a lot of this. Both sides are to be blamed for it, but what's been unique about the last few administrations, unlike previous ones, is this reflexively stopping the leasing or permitting of projects. That did not happen when I started in energy policy. The Clinton administration did not stop the projects for resources that they didn't like, neither did the Bush administration. But all of a sudden, in the last few administrations, we've seen a coal leasing ban. We've seen an oil and gas leasing ban. We've seen a wind ban. If these administrations had their way, we would literally have banned the vast majority of our electricity production. Where would we produce electricity from? And how would we drive our economic growth? I think instead of being outraged that somebody comes out and supports a particular resource, I think people should be outraged that we're taking American resources off the table.
Yeah, well, that's what I love about the Power Votes program, because I just think that that's a great way to educate people better about the realities on the ground. Can you talk a little bit more about that program y'all started?
Yeah, so we started a program called Power Votes, which is a grassroots network of supporters of the industry that are advocating on our behalf when key issues come up. If it's in Virginia and there's a battery storage bill, we provide the platform for them to weigh into the key policymakers, in this case, the governor, to thank her for her support for battery storage. When permitting reform was picking up in the House, we were able to send in messages to lawmakers to support permitting reform in the next upcoming vote. When there's legislation, when there are regulations at the federal, state, local levels that are important for our industry, we want to leverage the voices of our supporters, right? I talked a little bit about how I run the advocacy group. Well, we have lobbyists within the group, and they play a very important function to be able to educate lawmakers and to influence policy decision. But there's no better lobbyist than the constituent. The constituent who votes, who pays bills, who holds the members of Congress accountable for their actions, for their votes. If we can leverage those folks to be able to engage with policymakers, with lawmakers about the things they really care about, we feel like we're advancing the cause of the industry. In this case, the public is very concerned about the cost of electricity.
Right.
And, I think that was 2 weeks ago. Fast forward today, I should add, those same folks are very concerned about the price they're paying or going to pay at the pump. that's a powerful coalition of folks. And so if we can engage them with their policymakers to be able to advocate for policies that are going to lower the cost of energy, that's a huge benefit, not just for the industry, but we think for our supporters. It's a lot like what you do, Kevin. You're a voice for a group of people who provided an incredible sacrifice and service to our country.
Thank you.
And I think connecting them back to when they transitioning into the workforce, to be able to connect them to good paying jobs, to industries that are going to support them, that's a huge benefit. We love the fact that we can collaborate with you. Mm-hmm. We think veterans could be a key voice in all of this, given our conversation about the importance of national security when it comes to energy. And again, we're not offering jobs in one or two places in the United States. Our jobs are spread throughout the country. We now have a situation where 50 states have clean energy projects in their pipeline. As I said earlier, the vast majority of clean energy investment over the last few years has occurred in those interior Republican states or states represented by Republican members of Congress. The great thing about our industry, I think, is that we're misunderstood. I think the people probably think of our industry as some caricature of what green has been viewed in this country, essentially a meme. And actually worked in the oil and gas industry and felt a different characterization, the same type of thing. People jump to conclusions about the people working in those companies. And the fact is that people working in both the oil and gas industry and in the clean energy industry, they look just like your neighbors. They are the people that are supporting the energy that we need to drive this country forward. They often don't have a political agenda. And if they do, it's not one political agenda, right? We have a pretty diverse workforce in our industry. I think the other great thing is that you can work for something that's important. I did not join the clean energy industry because of climate change or because renewables were zero emitting sources of energy. It's not the reason I joined, but it is a benefit.
Yeah, it's a feature
for our country. It's a feature, and it's an important feature. And the reason I say it's an important feature is because I spent a lot of time when I was in the oil and gas industry, and they spent a lot of resources trying to reduce emissions. So it's important to them too. And so it does feel good when you hear the progress that our country's making as a result of the deployment of more clean energy. A lot more work to be done, but it's an interesting and exciting time in this space.
Yeah. So go back to power votes. That's one of the things I love when I first heard about it from the team was what we do with Project Vanguard is really about being like a high intensity, really in-depth affinity model for veterans in the industry.
Yeah.
But we can't do that for everybody, right? And we did this Texas tour, and I just saw, to your point on constituents as being these amazing messengers. Like, they don't need talking points. They just need a soapbox and a megaphone, right? Because I've seen what's different when you go into a state legislator's office and you're like, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'd love to talk to you about such and such. Great. They're very respectful. I've never seen anybody be any rude. They take notes. But I mean, like, if you're not a constituent, you're not in any alignment with them, you wouldn't have voted for them. Like, they're very polite and they take notes, but like, unless your appeal somehow magically does something, they're busy. They have a lot of things going on. They're going to forget about you. But when a primary voting constituent comes in and has a problem, the brakes stop and they're all ears on what this person has to say. And with the tour, we saw veterans, landowners, energy workers, the local business community, all these people that are impacted by energy projects that are in places that never would have had energy projects before are just amazing messengers for this. And I love how Power Votes is reaching out to everybody. So there's this higher, lowest level that you can't drop below in your education and your awareness of what's going on. What other demographics, talk about any of those, what are the most meaningful messengers that we need to kind of get this message across to policymakers?
Yeah, I mean, what you just described is the reason why if you go to a Little League game, they put all the local businesses and community groups, they pay to put their names on the uniforms or on the signs in the stadium, right? Because they want to be part of a community.
Yeah. When I owned an oil field supply company, I sponsored a Little League team.
There you go, right?
Yeah.
And I'm reminded of former boss of mine who used to tell this anecdote of the senator who told him, I always vote with my favorite lobbyist until I hear from my constituent. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Now, lobbying in Washington, D.C. is a very big business, and it is very important for corporate entities and public interest groups to have representatives here. But it's more important to have an army of people.
Yeah.
It's more important to have support from people. That's why, we read people are obsessed with approval ratings and how am I doing with my constituents. When I worked for members of the Senate, it was one of the first things they did each Monday was find out what their constituents were calling about or writing in about.
Yeah.
That's what power votes can bring, right? If it is a recognition that your voice matters, not just at the ballot box, but in weighing in with the policymaker and saying, this issue is important to me. Now, the folks that we're really honing in on are people who are generally right of center, who we think there is a pocket of support actually within for our industry and for what we're doing. First, the energy security issue is important to them. They care about low cost fuels. I happen to actually be in this category, so I do have some sense of what folks who are right of center feel about when it comes to energy. They're not tied in, for the most part, into what you described earlier on, frustration with the response to people reflexively just opposing it because it's a form of energy. I find that if you get out into the country and have conversations with people about energy, their views, like on most issues, are more nuanced than cable television. And that's what we're trying to tap into at Power Votes. I think that's something that you have tapped into at Project Vanguard. I frankly think it's actually a service. In addition to weighing in with policymakers, it's actually a service to policymakers. Because if they think that the discussion that's dominated by the 20% is actually reflective of public sentiment, then they're being deceived by clicks and by cable news. I was listening to an interview that Governor Shapiro did from Pennsylvania, and the interviewer was saying, basically, why aren't you more flashy and more headline grabbing?
Yeah.
And his basically was, it's just not who I am, and I would be doing a disservice to my constituents. And I think for us, nothing against them, but we're not an environmental NGO.
Yeah.
And we're not a political group either. We're a bunch of folks who develop energy projects. I'm not, I represent them, but they put up an awful amount of risk and capital and get into the arena to be able to produce energy for people. Oftentimes, like, you were saying earlier, some of the folks I've met in this industry come from the oil and gas space. They were working for a large...
I mean, both of us did.
That's right. Yep. And if I went around and looked at the large developers that we have, many of the executives have a background in the oil and gas space. It translates pretty well. And you'd probably find in the oil and gas space that there are folks with renewables backgrounds. And, I think the way that the two segments of the energy industry carry themselves, it would be nice to have that injected a bit into the public debate about it.
We just need authentic messengers that have that experience speaking to that experience. I mean, that's really all we're trying to do with like our community leader program.
Absolutely.
And, I appreciate you being willing to come and talk to them, getting them exposure to senior leaders in the industry, but then amplifying their voices. We don't have to manufacture anything. We just have to give them the space to speak. That's it.
That's great.
We were in Sweetwater interviewing a site manager, and he was like, I did one of these a few years ago. I didn't particularly care for it. I'm like, why is that? He's like, he wanted me to say a bunch of stuff about like I'm saving the planet for my kids. He's like, I guess. I'm like, well, why do you like working in this industry? He's like, it's the best paying job in town. I didn't have to move to get a good job. So I get to raise my kids around my parents. I'm not on the road all the time. And because of how our work structure is, I'm done at 3 so I can coach Little League. And I get to work on really cool technology with a really hardworking group of guys. And we get after it every day. I'm like, okay, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, he sounds like he's focused on saving the world around him.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, he's taking care of his family and just
not saving the world, saving the world around him. And
what is it? Charity starts at home.
Right. Like you probably hear that story over and over again, right? It's folks that recognize the opportunity within the industry. They want to be a part of a corporate structure that's a good corporate citizen.
Mm-hmm.
So like, giving back to the community, making sure that community input is not just something that's taken, but is actually acted upon. Something that's very important for us in the industry. We're facing increasing numbers of local issues because as we've scaled up as an industry, we're not just the mom and pop renewable energy industry anymore. We are a large corporate citizen in many of the places in which we're operating. And so you start to face local concerns. And there's 2 ways to deal with that. One is to run right over them, and that is not a recipe for success. The other is to work with the community because you're a part of the community, right? And, that could be in providing benefits for schools in the education space, for emergency responders, to build roads, to help employ people within the community. If you're doing that, you're going to be accepted in the community. So that's something I think our industry is working very hard at.
Yeah, no, I think, and staying in those, once we get through permitting, we got to stay active in those communities and building the social license to operate and be a good player. And through power votes, Project Vanguard, through Farm to Power, through Conservative Energy Network, there's so many different groups that are trying to galvanize grassroots support of real people in these project communities. I think the project communities are just such low-hanging fruit. We had one Texas state senator issue the most anti-renewables bills, but he had $8 billion of projects in his district. No blowback. His constituents even know that he was jeopardizing their jobs. You know what I mean? Like if they knew, which is what I think like Power Votes fills a gap for, is great. And then you need groups like Farm to Power and Project Vanguard where you can actually build those relationships. Because I've seen it where we did our first lobby day. There were a lot of people, I'd never run a legislative day where we're going to have people go meet with them. I didn't really know what it was, but getting 15 vets from industry to go do it, they're like, I don't know. I've known you for a few years, Kevin. I'm going to make you buy me an extra round if this is a waste of my time, but sure. Sounds good. And everybody enjoyed it. But I mean, it was just meeting and hanging out and talking with, their elected officials, other people in the state. And I think you just got to have those groups on top of power votes to mobilize and get people to turn out in person. Because you got to say, come with me, not you should go.
Yeah, absolutely. Every year we do Clean Power on the Hill.
Yeah.
We bring in hundreds of people from the industry.
That was great last year.
What I like about it is being able to bring in frontline workers, people that actually are taking the day off to go talk to their legislator about what they do and why it's so important for the country and what policies we need to implement to make sure we can continue to do it. Again, stuff like that, super important for legislators to hear. I think there's a bit of grace for members of Congress. They are stretched very thin. They don't have these massive staffs. They oftentimes serve on committees that have a whole range of issues. Imagine trying to be a expert in tech and healthcare and energy and then move over to foreign relations. And by the end of the day, you're like, probably, what did I just sit through? Not an easy job. And then you're hearing from constituents and you have to be able to separate fact from fiction in hearing from so-called special interests. So they have a tough job. And I think it's incumbent upon us and our advocates to really present them with credible data and facts and arguments that support our industry and the things that we're working on. And if you can't do that, if you don't show up with facts and data and you just show up with ideology, it's not going to work. So we're fortunate to have, I think, a pretty strong set of facts on our side. Again, we're the lowest cost, fastest to deploy. We're creating jobs. We are growing faster than any other segment of the energy sector. All of those things are on our side. Certainly, we are part of the solution to affordable, reliable, and cleaner energy. It's needed now more than ever. And I also think from a policy perspective, we're past the tax credit debate.
Well, we definitely are.
We're competing on a level playing field.
Yeah.
And pretty soon, no one's going to be arguing about being oversubsidized, or I think that's a huge attack on the industry. You know, if you think about the major, people would probably think of as Achilles heels in the clean energy space, it's on the reliability side, and battery storage is really changing the game on energy reliability. It's on the trade side, so too much of our components are reliant on other energy sources. We agree with that, and we're working very hard, making billions in investments to change that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
The tax side, well, we're competing on a level playing field now, and we're the most cost-effective source of energy out there. So I think we're starting to chip away at those arguments that people have had about renewables, and we're still not just standing, our industry is thriving. 2025 was the best year for clean power deployment in this country. We broke records, and we anticipate that we're probably going to do that again in 2026, even with all the policy headwinds that are facing our industry. The reason is twofold. One, our industry has just gotten much more mature, better capitalized. It really is a true size and scale, big energy resource in this country. And I think the second reason is more market driven, which is we just need a lot of power now. The demand side of things is truly something that I think people did not anticipate 5 years ago.
No, I don't think anybody anticipated this level of, demand growth. But Frank, as we wrap up, I want to, just 2 points. One, thanks for being the first non-veteran on the podcast. Brave man.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, been saving that. You'll get a shirt.
Awesome.
It'll probably have some barbecue stains in true veteran stash fashion. We'll steal it from somebody who left it laying out.
Well, I'm happy to do it.
But, we also haven't had anybody who's been on the external affairs side. And so I've known folks like, Dan Hendricks at Clearway, but I haven't known a ton of vets getting into that space. But I see a lot of them going into Miguel Salazar over there and Wade, Glitz, great vets working in the team. And I love how Wade was able to bring Miguel in, although I wish he'd found a non-Marine, but what are you going to do?
I'm not dumb enough to comment about that. Love the Marines.
Just agree. I got the soundbite. I'll send it to Wade. But for people looking to get into this section of the industry, what advice would you have for them, for military veterans that are looking to get in or interested in it and learning more?
Yeah, it's not a rule, but the majority of folks that I know in the external affairs advocacy space have government service. Work for legislature, governor, senator's office, something either at the federal or state level.
Is that to check the box, or is that to kind of dip your toe in, or that's just getting on staff? There's a lot of them and they churn fast, so it's kind of an entryway.
To be perfectly honest about it, now I can say this now that I'm getting later in my career, I think most people in those jobs would love to stay in those jobs for their careers, but they cannot afford it. The public service jobs. They maybe get married, start a family, buy a home. Expenses still have student loans. Expenses start to become more, and the hours are quite difficult. You're relying on, there's also not greater job security because you're sometimes tied to somebody else's career. A politician decides to retire and there goes your job. So there's a whole host of reasons. But if you ask folks, I've had so many conversations with people about this, they would say, I would really stay in this job. It's the best job I ever had. The reason I bring all of that up is because no better public service than what veterans are doing or have done. And so there could be a huge opportunity for veterans to serve in political public service and then move into external affairs. There should also be avenues for veterans to move into external affairs. I would say, the same advice I would tell people who weren't veterans, like keep your ears open on this industry where it's not the peak time for it, but we're still doing pretty well and people are still hiring. And so I'd also talk to some of the folks that you mentioned. We do have some people in this industry, not just in the field, but also in the external affairs space who are veterans. I'd reach out to them. I mean, my piece of advice to really anybody, either starting out their career or entering into a career transition, it sounds superficial, but like it's the best piece of advice that I've ever been given is do what you actually want to do. Don't do what somebody else wants you to do. Don't do what you think you can only afford to do. Don't do what you think is going to make your resume better to whoever. I don't know. Life is short. You got to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
And oftentimes what you want to do is something that gives you meaning and purpose, right? I'm sure you feel that in your career.
Yeah.
And if someone provided you with an opportunity that might have other different benefits associated with it, but wasn't meaningful and purposeful, I doubt you take it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the advice that I would give to folks. Most of the people that I know have actually walked that career path. I know people that work on trade policy in our space, and they literally love it. They just love learning more about it. They love teaching people about it. They love digging into the details in it and working and advocating on it. And a lot of that is personal, Kevin, right?
Oh, I get it. I'm an energy nerd. I ran a retail distribution business for oil field supply.
Exactly.
Never once wanted to read about retail distribution outside of like a problem I had to fix. And in this industry, I listen and read a lot of stuff just because I think it's cool and very squarely in the energy nerd domain.
Yeah, I mean, I did healthcare policy for 4 years. It was 4 years where I couldn't wait to get back to energy.
Yeah.
And so I would tell folks external affairs is a great discipline, right? Like either in the government affairs side or the comms side. It's fast paced. You're always learning something. You're working on important things. It's been great.
Well, Frank, that's great, man. I appreciate it. This has been a fun hour, and I think it's going to be really insightful for a lot of our members. So I just want to say thank you again for making the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, Frank. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning into the Project Vanguard podcast. If this episode sparked something for you, share it with someone who's ready to think differently, whether it's about an all-the-above energy approach, how energy security is national security, or the veteran workforce in our industry. If you believe what we're building, a quick review goes a long way. You can do that wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, keep up the fire.